The doors to the Viridian tea house are open once more after 5 or 6 months. Yeah, so the last time that I did these videos, I said, I need a break. For those of you who don't know, I returned to corporate and I returned to being a Bank Security Act anti-money laundering associate for a credit union here in Colorado. And it took up a lot of my time. It still does. But I said, you know what? I don't have to do what I used to do with Viridian Tea House. I'm gonna try something different. So these videos they're no longer going to be once a week, but they're going to be once a month. And I'm gonna put a little bit more focus on my work. And so welcome to the different but still the same Viridian Tea House. Welcome. Now, before I really get into the meat and potatoes of everything, I do want to talk about the books that I'm currently reading. I'm not going to review them. I still kind of review books on Goodreads, but it's not like it used to be. Anyway, you'll see what I mean. It's good to see you, by the way. It's really good. So the first book I'm reading is Dragonlance, Dragons of a Fallen Sun by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And I read this many years ago. And so when I saw a copy of it, I was like, I have to get this. It's been too long since I was in the world of Dragonlance. And as soon as I opened up the book and just started reading the words, I was sent back. And it's been a good feeling so far. Unfortunately, because I'm such a bibliophile, my eyes are going off into like 5 different books. So I think at one point, I think this week I was reading 3 books, but one of them I devoured in 2 days called The Maid. If you've heard of it, but you've never read it before, I highly recommend it. I'm already looking forward to the second book. But anyway, Dragons of a Fallen Sun, The War of Souls, Volume 1, my current read. And my other current read is A Monstrous Regiment of Women by Laurie R. King. This is part of the Mary Russell Sherlock Holmes series. And I only read the first book, and that was years ago. So in returning to this series, I said, all right, I'm going to start over, but I'm going to do it right. So finally got my hands on this copy. This is the second book. And so far, it's wonderful. Just like reading Dragonlance, it's just nice to return to these particular worlds. So I highly recommend those two. If you're into fantasy or mystery, or you just are trying to find a new reader, definitely check out these authors, and this one too. So I just got a new book released. As many of you know, many of my books are self-published, and I'm still I'm working with a new publisher. Big shout out to Seventh Star Press in Kentucky. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Holly. You guys are amazing. And several months ago, I handed them a manuscript and I said, you know, the worst case scenario is they look at it and they go, this is not for us, but thank you so much. You know, hope you find a home. Well, they decided to make themselves the home, and I couldn't be prouder. And this is The Blood Emperor. This is the first book in my Napoleon Bonaparte series. If Stephen has his way, it's probably going to be 4 or 5 books. I'm thinking it's definitely going to be at least 3, maybe 4. What I've done has just been so fantastic. And this actually came about when I lived in New Orleans. And I will never forget, I was listening to a particular song, and all of a sudden I just saw this novel just open itself in front of me. And I went, I'm not gonna write that. I mean, it's a great idea, but nah, I don't want to do it. So then fast forward to me moving to Colorado, and I just finished writing the latest in one of my murder mystery series. And I'll never forget, I typed in the words unnamed Napoleon Bonaparte novel by Kimberly B. Richardson. And I thought, well, we're doing this. So finally, this book has been published and I couldn't be prouder. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read the first chapter for you. So if you're ready. Oh, and before I get into the reading, there's also the new Blood Emperor tea blend. And this is a Lapsang Shusang tea, which is a smoky black, vanilla powder, blueberries, and ginger. So my boyfriend and I tried it a couple of days ago, and we were both like, yeah, this is good. This is really good. And I thought, this is the kind of tea that Bonaparte would drink in my book series, which funnily enough, I think he only has just a couple of cups of tea in the first book. So anyway, I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. Only I would find that funny. But anyway, you can get bags of the tea through my website, viridianteacompany.com. You can also get trade paperback copies of The Blood Emperor through viridianteacompany.com. But if you're interested in ebooks or hardbacks, you can go to Seventh Star Press and order your copies through them. And I'll put up the links where you can order accordingly. So I've actually made some Blood Emperor here, and it smells divine. So I will be taking random sips. So get yourself a nice warm beverage, wrap yourself up in a blanket, and let's go to New Orleans, shall we? Okay, let's see. Chapter 1. After years of tears, lying to myself, and finally coming to a harsh truth, I, Julia Robichaux, returned to New Orleans. Well, not exactly New Orleans, more like Metairie. Same thing, I guess. One of my best friends, my soul brother, kept telling me for years how badly he wanted me to move there. Instead of being 6 hours apart, we would only be a mere 10 minutes, and he was better suited to handle that. Just think of it, Xavier would joke with me whenever I would visit him. I can come by and see you whenever I want. Plus, aren't you getting tired of always driving here? I mean, most of your friends live here, right? I had to agree with him. Most of my friends did live in La Nouvelle-Orléans. And although I had a wonderful 2-bedroom apartment that cost me next to nothing, I knew that I wasn't happy. I hated where I lived, hated the people even more, and how they looked at me like I was some kind of freak. Every time I visited New Orleans, I felt as though I belonged there. It was my father's fault, of course. After his wife, my mother, died 10 years ago, Elijah Spearman, professor of American literature at Fulton University, came up with the idea that he wasn't close enough to his adult daughter, Julia. His daughter, who was 40 years old, never married and didn't plan on it, and lived a surprisingly successful life as a full-time author of cozy mysteries involving an owner of a tea house in Denver, Colorado. My father loved anything regarding American literature, especially literature that came from the South, especially New Orleans and anything Southern Louisiana. When I asked him one night over a beer why he loved the area so, he told me that that was where he had met my mother. I'll never forget it, little scholar, he said, calling me by my pet name. There I was, enjoying a ghost tour in the French Quarter with the other out-of-place tourists when I saw her. Lovely Lily Robichaux, stepping out of her small tea house, just like your novels. He sighed, and I giggled when I noticed that his eyes were all dreamy-like. Her skin was like an afternoon sky. She was truly a goddess in human form. She looked as though she was a queen addressing her court, yet she was only stepping outside to grab a cigarette. Ah, yes, true love, I said while laughing. Hush, little scholar. Anyway, I saw her, she saw me, and then she smiled. I'm sure she wondered why a skinny Jewish man with black framed glasses was staring at her, yet when she walked straight toward me and told me her name, I knew I was going to marry her. And that's, he said as he pointed his lit cigarette at me, while I'll never stop loving her, or the state. It was the state that brought me to her. Louisiana runs in your blood, you know. He took a drag off his cigarette and winked at me. I knew the story, both sides, considering that Maman told me a slightly different side, one involving him leaping into the air, falling to kneel at her startled feet, and demanding that she pledge her love to him. Of course, I didn't believe either of them, but I thought it was cute to know that they fell hard for each other at first sight. I didn't think things like that happened, yet what would I know? The last time I went on a date was over 5 years ago, only for me to give it all up due to my publisher wanting me to crank out more books and me enjoying the life of a single biracial woman. This was also why I made the choice to finally move to New Orleans, not only because of my friends, but also because I wanted to begin working on a new mystery series involving a woman who owned a haunted antique store in the Garden District. When I told my friend Xavier about the idea, he went over the moon for it. "This is yet another reason why you need to move down here, darling," he said with a turned-up French accent, causing me to roll my eyes. "Damn it, you're worse than my father," I replied with a laugh. When I told him that I wanted to move down here, he just nodded and told me that my blood was calling me home. "See, you can't deny your blood. So when you coming? Tomorrow?" "Very funny," I replied as my heart began to race a little. I had lived in my apartment in this city for so long that I grew comfortable with it. Everything I knew was within a 5-mile radius, and for me to suddenly pull myself out of it and land in a city with such history and culture, well, I didn't want to tell anyone, but I was intimidated by it. Just because I had friends down there didn't mean shit as far as I was concerned. What would happen if I moved down there only to find that all my so-called friends suddenly dropped me? What then? You do realize you just said all of that out loud to me, right? I shook my head and noticed that I was still on the speakerphone with Xavier. I closed my eyes and sighed. Merde. "Look," he said in a no-nonsense voice, I'll be here for you. You know that. You can't get rid of me. We made that pact, remember?" I smiled as the memory returned to me. One night in a bar in Bourbon Street. Xavier and I both drank heavily after his coming out to me. I was the first person he told. His parents had disowned him, but thankfully they lived in Kansas, so there really weren't too many tears spilled over that. Add to the fact that he wasn't close with them after they decided to leave New Orleans because of the rising crime rate and the fact that they wanted a cleaner place to live. Several beers later, we decided to go hang out at Oz, my all-time favorite gay club. We danced our asses off, and when Xavier found a cute guy to flirt with for a while, I meandered to the bar and drank water. We promised that night to be there for each other no matter what. He would be my older brother, he was 46, and I would always be his little and successful sister. "I know you're going to be there for me," I said as I tried not to cry. "And give me 3 months, okay? I need time to take care of matters." Xavier screamed with delight, sounding like a woman who just got engaged. I laughed and hung up the phone. Time for a little tea break. So one thing I noticed about the Blood Emperor blend is I added, I think it was sugar too. I normally drink my tea with honey, but I added sugar because I was like, I'm really curious to see what flavors come up. And I noticed the blueberry got smoky and it just made it so pleasant and smooth. You know, just a little side note, whenever I have customers smelling any of my Lapsang Shusang tea blends, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you know, it's so strong." And it's like, yeah, it is. But wait until you steep it. It actually gets quite mild. You still have that smoky taste, but it's not overpowering. It's not like you're like eating a campfire or something like that. But anyway, so with the sugar, the blueberry came out. And then when it got colder, I noticed that the vanilla and the ginger took their place. So from me to you, a little bit of Blood Emperor blend. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Okay, back to it. 3 months flew by faster than I thought. After telling my publisher my decision and she agreed emphatically, I began Operation NOLA Move. I told my leasing agent well in advance, and because I'd been such an excellent tenant, she waived all the moving out fees and returned my deposit without even wondering if I would leave my apartment in a satisfactory condition. I only had 2 friends in the city, so telling them that I was moving away really wasn't that much of a moment of wailing and crying. In fact, while one friend didn't even return my phone call, the other just sniffed over the phone and told me that she figured I would end up in New Orleans anyway. We hung up after a literally 2-minute phone call. I threw a huge apartment sale and got rid of shit I honestly didn't want or need any longer. I had more than enough money saved up, plus I had many of my maman's things locked away in a storage unit down there. I wanted to start my new chapter with those items. My father didn't cry at all. In fact, he started making plans as to when he would drive down to visit me. Oh, Dad. I wish that my parents had other children, but they told me that there were complications after trying twice. I remember the look on my mom's face when she told me. We love you so much, she said in her husky voice, enough to spread to 3 children. You just got it all, I suppose. She shrugged her shoulders like she always did, and then pulled me in one of her tight embraces that smelled of vanilla and cardamom. 2 years later, she left this world for the Otherlands, thanks to smoking 2 packs a day for 20 years. I thought that perhaps my dad would then give up smoking, yet it seemed as though he smoked even more. Not out of anger or sadness, but rather, and this is my belief, that he wanted to be reunited with her for all eternity. There's no other reason for it. The funeral was interesting, to say the least. While my dad was Reformed Jewish, my mama was different. While my father would attend synagogue and I would go along with him, I'm perpetually halfway through my conversion. I would also spend time with Mama and her tarot cards, her tea leaf readings, and her concrete belief in the other worlds. My father never chided her for having such beliefs. In fact, he encouraged them greatly, but he never wanted his tarot to be read. Perhaps he knew of something that he didn't want to share with any of us. On the final day of my 3 months, I locked the door to my now empty apartment for the final time and walked outside to sit on the concrete stoop as I stared at my small moving hitch connected to my car. Apparently, I had got rid of almost everything I owned. I lit a cigarette I had pinched from Dad and smoked as if I had all the time in the world. I didn't, or at least I made myself feel that way. Well, I said to myself while watching the smoke lazily curl around my finger, time for a new chapter. Time to move forward. Time for blah, blah, blah. I smiled as I finished my cigarette, then crushed the butt under my heel and drove my car south. The trip was quite nice, seeing as how I had all my CDs with me. Everything from The Cure to David Poe to opera to Vivaldi to Sex Pistols to Charlie Parker. I was blessed to have a wide appreciation for all kinds of music. I took one break involving a bathroom and some food, then it was back on the highway for me. When I saw the Bienvenue en Louisiane sign, I felt tears running down my face. Je suis arrivé. I pulled over to the Welcome Center and immediately dialed Xavier's number. He picked up on the second ring. Allô? Xavier, it's me. I took a deep breath. I'm here. Silence then. Carl, you're here? Wait, where is here? Just crossed the state line. We'll be at your place soon. I'll get the drinks ready. I clicked off and sped away. As many times as I had driven to Louisiana, it always felt like the first time whenever my car made contact with the elevated bridge. This time, I put in a Harry Connick Jr. CD and sang along as my car brought me closer to my new home. I was so glad that Xavier was able to let me stay with him for a week as the apartment complex prepared for my move-in. I really didn't want to live in the city for now, and Metairie was my logical choice. Xavier lived in the 7th Ward in a cute shotgun that he claimed was too big for him, yet he didn't want to get rid of it for something smaller. He wanted me to live with him, yet I told him that as much as I appreciated the gesture, I wanted my own place. No offense to my soul brother at all. The elevated bridge curved to the left and I was on I-10, soon to arrive in Kennebraw, as stated by the locals. I smiled as the sunny day welcomed me, along with the speeding cars that whizzed by me as though my 70 miles an hour was as fast as a turtle. I kept up and soon I found myself in Metairie, and then Nola proper. I made it, Mama, I whispered. I wanted to cry but held it all in till I reached Xavier's house. Above-ground cemeteries welcomed me with stone arms, while signs for City Park had me wondering about Café du Monde located there. I drove by the city and waved at the Superdome. Soon I saw the exit sign for Elysian Fields and braved the traffic to get over in enough time. 10 minutes later, I pulled up on the sidewalk in front of Xavier's house, turned off the car, and leaned my head against the steering wheel. Good Lord, I had done it. Someone knocked at my window. I lifted my now weary head to find Xavier smiling at me and holding a bottle of Andigator beer. I'm so glad you didn't have any problems coming down, he said as we sat outside in his patio behind the house. Since Xavier had a love for all things Japanese, he had turned part of his backyard into a Zen garden, complete with the appropriate rocks and places for people to sit and meditate. Xavier put on one of his kimono robes and was enjoying his second beer while I was still on my first. As soon as I had gotten out of my car, we hugged for the longest time. I missed his bay rum scent. I know that sometimes that drive can suck the life right out of you, he added as I lit up a cigarette. Since when did you start smoking? Again, he added a wink. Since I made this crazy-ass decision to move down here, I said as I blew a smoke ring into the too blue sky. This is all your fault, by the way. Xavier placed a well-manicured hand across his chest and fluttered his eyes. Moi? Oui, I yelled. You got all this in your blood. You can't escape this place, you know. My parents did, claiming this and that, only to tell me last night that they miss it here. Huh, ain't that some shit? I took a swig from my beer and sighed. It truly did feel wonderful to be here. I had decided, much to my publisher's liking, that I would take a week off to get settled, then resume working on not only the last novel involving the tea house, but also begin conducting research on the Haunted Antique Shop mystery series. So what, they want to move back here? Crazy. I know, and so droll how now I'm their loving son. Now they admit that perhaps they made a mistake in disowning me. Whatever. I think it's because I make a lot of money. He finished off his beer, then got up with no signs of being tipsy at all. Want another? He said as he pointed at my bottle. No, but are we going out to eat? I'm starving. Tell you what, let me get dressed and we'll go to the quarter. Deco? I nodded yes, and he disappeared inside. I finished off my cigarette and then reclined in my chair. Far off in the distance, I could hear someone drumming, followed by someone singing their heart out. Not a key out of place either. I heard a dog barking, followed by a "Get down, sweetie," and soon a fuzzy and fat tan and white dog came barreling out of the house and jumped in my lap. Hello, Beignet, I said while trying to avoid the corgi's happy tongue as she tried to lick my face, adding her welcome to New Orleans. Beignet, get down! Beignet, of course, didn't listen as she wiggled and squirmed in my lap. Xavier crossed his arms and sighed. You'd think that she'd learn not to do that. He walked toward us, and his face immediately softened as he scratched her chin and made baby noises at her. And this is why she won't learn, I replied while laughing. Beignet jumped from my lap, then raced around Xavier's legs. He led his pride and joy back inside the house, leaving me to my thoughts once more. I knew that I wanted to become a member of the New Orleans Museum of Art, or NOMA, immediately. One of my favorite coffee houses was on Oak Street, which is actually Rue de la Course. I knew that the place would become my Sunday go-to. I began to giggle. This was truly coming together for me. Xavier returned sometime later, smelling of freshly applied bay rum and dressed as the metrosexual of the year. I looked at him up and down and rolled my eyes. Expecting to pick up someone? I asked as I waggled my eyebrows. I'll have you know that I'm still happy with Peter, thank you. Peter, my age, and working for the Historical New Orleans collection, seemed too good to be true for him. I really didn't think that they were going to last long, yet that had been a year ago. Peter lived in a lovely and crumbling house in Algiers Point, and when I asked how in the world he was able to afford that, Xavier replied with, old French money. Oh, that explained it all. All right, you're the one who was starving. The Uber should be here. Oh, wait, it's outside. I grabbed my bag and we made our way to the front of the house where a white Nissan waited for us. We drove off. The Uber driver sped through the streets without a care in the world as radio station WWOZ played our background music. Y'all a couple, the driver, an older man with a cigar sticking out of the corner of his mouth, asked us. Xavier and I looked at each other and laughed. No, but our lovely Julia's finally moved here, Xavier offered with a grin. That's so. Where are you from, baby? My mother's from here, I replied. Well, she was, and she's dead. Oh, sorry to hear that. Well, welcome home. The man gunned the engine and sped down Elysian Fields. Xavier took my hand in his and rubbed it tenderly. I knew what he was thinking. I was finally here with him. No more long distance drives in the middle of the night. I was here for good. We soon found ourselves in the quarter, and as the driver slowed down somewhat, I gave myself a chance to take it all in. Tourists were all over the place, throwing their cares to the wind as they let it all hang out in the Big Easy, while the inhabitants of the quarter easily sidestepped them as they went on their merry ways. I saw a group of people being led around by a woman dressed in all black, holding a black parasol, and wondered if it was a ghost, vampire, or everything else themed tour. The Uber driver pulled up in front of Cafe Amelie and stopped. "All right, here you go," the driver said as we got out of the car, and Xavier paid the man a nice tip. "Again, welcome home." He drove off in search of his next passenger, and I waved. "I forgot if you've ever been here before," Xavier said as we walked up to the front desk to check on our reservations. I took a deep breath and sighed with pleasure. Although I had only been to this restaurant once before, the memory lingered in my mind for quite some time. I loved the outdoor seating with the soft music playing in the background, not to mention the good food. Then again, I don't think I'd ever had a terrible meal in New Orleans. The hostess, dressed in a purple dress with matching colored hair, led us to our table and we sat ourselves. "Peter took me here last week and we enjoyed this delicious red that I know you'll enjoy," he said with glee. Dearie, you forgot that I'm allergic to wine." "Shit, Julia's so sorry. Well, we can enjoy an Amelie, no?" Just then our server walked up to us. She was a tall and skinny woman with curly black hair and sparkling eyes. She wore light blue pants that were just cut at the ankles, clinky black shoes, and a white loose-fitting linen shirt. Blah. She looked like an art student, a culinary student, or both. "Bonjour," she said to both of us. "My name is Francine. What drinks may I start with you this evening?" "We'll have 2 of the Amelie," Xavier replied, and Francine handed us menus and then walked off. "I'm thinking of the black truffle pasta primavera. You?" I studied the dinner menu and wanted all of it. Every entree sounded delicious to me, especially as my last meal had been something from a gas station. "I think I'll have the roasted chicken," I replied. "Ooh, good choice." Peter had that and he couldn't stop moaning about it. "By the way," he added as he leaned in, "when are you going to knock the dust off and get back into the swing of things?" "I have no plans to do any kind of dust knocking," I replied with a snicker. Francine returned with our drinks and glasses of water. She set everything on the table, then took our orders. After she left again, I hissed, "Why are you so concerned about me dating again?" "Honestly, because I refuse to see you mope around in your apartment with your typewriter as your only friend," Xavier replied with a dramatic roll of his eyes. "Julia, I love you very much. I've read all your books several times. You cleaned me up when I've had too much to drink, which we're cruising a quarter after this. Anyway, I just don't want you living alone for the rest of your life." I took a sip of my Amelie and murmured delicious noises. "Didn't I tell you that it's fantastic?" "Xav, I appreciate your concern, but honestly, I'm happy being alone. I'm not lonely, you know. I've got many friends here, plus you, so I can't possibly be lonely." "Then when will you get some?" I shushed him and then looked around, only to remember that no one cared as long as you weren't hurting anyone. "Seriously, just have a one-night stand for fuck's sake." I've never been into that, and I have no plans of trying it now. "Are you two all right?" We stopped our playful squabble to find Francine looking down at us. We both smiled and said that our drinks were impeccable. Having made sure that we had everything we needed, she left us, and I leaned back in my chair to enjoy the chilled vodka. Our meals arrived, and thankfully our squabble took a break. "Mademoiselle." "Oui, monsieur. Savez-vous ces deux-là?" "Oui, monsieur. Avez-vous besoin de parler avec eux?" "No. Merci beaucoup." After we finished our meals, Xavier had to order dessert, although I would have been happy with beignets and cafe au lait. He muttered that I would have all the time in the world for the little donuts, and then proceeded to order 2 servings of cherry bread pudding. I felt my stomach press uncomfortably against my jeans, yet knew that I could never say no to dessert. After Francine left us once more, I took a good look around the courtyard. Ever eaten inside? I asked Xavier. Once with Peter, but honestly, I prefer eating out here. Feels so European, you know. I looked around, studying the different patrons of the cafe, until my eyes landed on a man seated somewhat towards the back. The only reason why I noticed him was that he moved his booted foot from the mass of shadows that surrounded him. I noticed that his pale hands rested on the table, and yet I didn't see any kind of food or water on his table. Oh, well, I thought as I returned my gaze to Xavier. Some people. Once we finished our desserts, which were fattening and delicious, Xavier led me out of the cafe and into the throngs of people in the quarter. However, I asked if I could have a quick smoke break in front of the cathedral. Xavier sighed dramatically and then giggled. We walked down the side of the massive church and sat on one of the benches. Our eyes immediately went toward the various palm readers, tarot readers, tourists with that wondering look on their faces as they realized that they were no longer in Kansas, as well as people getting ready for their various tour guides. Xavier and I made snarky comments about the people who walked by us, while I enjoyed my terrible habit. Oh my God, girl, check him out. I looked and saw a man dressed as though he stepped out of an Anne Rice novel. Julia, is he Louis or Lestat? I still can't believe you've never read those books. Sorry, but I was too busy reading your books, Missy. The man walked with a somewhat lurching quality, as though he was stalking human prey. I had to take my eyes off him to keep myself from breaking out into laughter. I knew he probably had plastic fangs in his mouth. Besides, does it take you back to your goth days? Take me back? Bitch, I'm still goth, okay? Easy, Vampira. So, when will you go with me to a goth night, It's just not my thing, okay? All that black, it doesn't go well with my complexion. I cackled and resumed my people watching. I saw several women dressed up in way too much pink with teased blonde hair, walking around with large containers of alcoholic drinks. Actually, they were stumbling, but that's beside the point. Two groups of people were about to be led by a tour guide. A man dressed in dark-colored jeans, black boots, and a crisp shirt the color of a pale sunrise slowly strolled by us. He walked with a long black walking stick and a huge golden knob on top, and his hair was stylishly cut without looking too metrosexual. His nose was rather long, Roman-looking, while his eyes seemed to be focused on something, or perhaps nothing at all. For some reason, I couldn't stop staring at him as he walked by, with seemingly no cares in the world. Julia. I watched him walk by, and a small part of me wanted him to turn and face me. Julia. There was something about him. Julia! I blinked like an owl and stared at Xavier, who wore a very wide grin. What? I took a drag off my cigarette. Are you through undressing him? What? I saw what you did, you minx. I love using the word minx in my books. Sorry, just give me a minute. I turned to my left and noticed that the man had disappeared. I returned my gaze to Xavier and shrugged. Are you done with that cancer stick? He asked. I nodded yes and crushed it under my shoe. Xavier took me by the hand and we threw ourselves into the night. So I'm going to skip a couple of parts here. We're still on chapter 1. Okay. I approached the cathedral with a semblance of reverence, even though I wasn't Christian. Several tourists were snapping photos of the impressive structure. I walked along and found myself at the Cabildo, one of the museums that herald the history of Louisiana. I walked into the cool ticket office and smiled at the older black woman who sat behind the register. How you doing? She asked as I approached her. Doing well, and you? I'm just glad to be alive. How can I help you? One adult ticket, please. She took my money and thanked me. I turned left into one of the exhibit rooms and I slowed down my walk to view everything around me, taking it all in like a desperate sponge. I went up the stairs and enjoyed the exhibit involving the Battle of New Orleans, even though I wasn't a war history buff. Turning the corner, I noticed the immense and colorful painting of Napoleon Bonaparte as emperor, plus one of his death masks in a glass box for all to see. I stopped in my tracks and peered down at the anguished face. I almost wanted him, the mask, to take one last breath just so I could see that, yes, he was human. When it failed to breathe for several minutes, I turned my gaze to the painting and sighed. Do you think he was wrong? I turned to find a man standing a distance from me. He wore dark indigo jeans, black boots, and a black long-sleeved shirt. His dark hair seemed windswept, yet I knew that the wind barely moved today. I blinked several times as though his words freed me from a spell. Sorry? The man took several steps toward me. I noticed that a rolled-up black umbrella fit snugly under his arm. Do you think Napoleon was wrong in trying to conquer Europe? That he was greedy beyond words? I noticed that he carried a bit of a French accent, so subtle that one can almost miss it if they weren't listening for it. I looked up at the painting and then at the man once more. Honestly, I don't know, I replied as truthfully as possible. He was both a monster and a genius, if you believe the history books. I never thought that he was a god, but merely a man who accomplished and lost so much. A good way of putting it, the man said with a smile, but then again, the British still think of him as Old Boney, the one that they made sure stayed defeated. He laughed as if he had told the funniest joke ever. I smiled a little as I felt his presence all over me as he stood several feet away from me. Both monster and genius, you say? I glanced at the death mask one more, then turned to face the man again and noticed that he had moved closer to me. Enchanté, he said with a little bow of his head. Enchanté, monsieur. Tu parles français? Un peu, I replied with a sheepish grin, causing him to laugh. Then I'll stick with English. I had to speak with you. I watched your face as you stared at the painting and the death mask. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them wide. I stared into those bright eyes and wanted to drown in them, as corny as that sounded. Are you a student? No, an author doing some research. I write murder mysteries. Suddenly he took my hand in his and kissed the back of my hand so lightly that I barely felt his lips. How old world, I thought. I'm ashamed to admit that I've never met an author before, he murmured as he released my hand. Tell me, do you have many books out now? About 10 so far, I said with a hint of pride. I'm Julia Robichaud. You? For now, I would like to be your guide for the day, he said with a wink. I nodded my agreement to his position as he placed a hand on the lower part of my back and led me out of the room and soon of the cabildo. I hope you don't mind me taking you out of there. It seemed that you were only in there for one thing. Once we were outside, he pushed up his umbrella. I have sensitive skin, he said as he walked along. A part of me was a little concerned that I allowed myself to be swept away by this stranger, yet another part of me remembered that I had pepper spray in my bag. Easily accessible. I allowed myself to feel somewhat relaxed, yet kept my guard up. Where are we going? Well, I figured you might want to start with a visit to that charming bookstore down the street. Faulkner House Books is one of my favorite places to visit. Truth be told, I just wanted him to keep talking. That accent drove me high school girl crazy. I have an account with him, my nameless guide said. I do enjoy a good book and plenty of quiet time to read. I love to read as well, I replied, and wanted to kick myself for sounding so dumb. Of course I like to read. I was a fucking author. We walked down the alleyway and soon found ourselves in front of the white painted bricks, pale blue shutters, and glass inlaid doors of our destination. My nameless guide closed his umbrella, then opened the door for me and I walked in. It had been quite some time since I last visited Faulkner House Books, yet once I stopped inside, I felt at home. The small yet intimate bookstore held such a decor of intimacy and seduction to the bibliophile, such quiet bliss. Bonjour, Marie, my guide said in a somewhat commanding tone to the woman who sat by a table covered with books and ephemera. She looked at me and him, then quickly jumped up and bowed low. She looked like a hip librarian, yet I was concerned as she took her patron so seriously. Bonjour, monsieur, she said as she regained herself. Ça va? Très bien, et toi? Marie bowed low again. Très bien, monsieur, maintenant que vous êtes ici. She blushed a little, and I thought that perhaps they were an item. Oh well, such is love. What can I do for you and your friend? She asked with wide, eager eyes. Marie, meet Julia Robichaud, a well-known author of mysteries and murder. Before she could bow again, I offered my hand to shake. It's been a while since I was last in here, I offered, but I'm glad to be in here now. I'm working on a new book involving a woman who owns a haunted antique store, but I added as I glanced at my guide, I'm also here to begin my new Louisiana collection. Ah, well, you picked the right bookshop. Would you be interested in obtaining a membership? It's only $100 a month or $2.95 for 3 months. Before I could reply, my guide stepped up and muttered something to French and Marie. She fell back a little and gasped as she clutched her single strand of pearls around her neck, looking every bit of the stunned Southern belle. She regained her composure and added, Monsieur has advised that he'll be handling your subscription for 10 years. My mouth literally dropped to the floor. I turned to face my guide, who merely smiled, then walked toward one of the shelves to peruse some of the titles. He didn't have to do that, I replied to Marie, who shook her head no. Oh no, Julia, it is an honor to assist him when needed, and his friends. I glanced at the man, now pulling out several books and setting them to the side, then at Marie again. Who is he? I whispered, hoping like hell he didn't hear me. Marie smiled and then returned to the table to pick up a notebook and fountain pen. Now then, she said as she turned a fresh page, tell me your reading interests, please. We can get started on your list. The pen hovered over the page as she waited with bated breath. Something was very, very wrong with all of this. I knew that people could be generous with their money and time towards others, but this was simply too much, not to mention the fact that we just met. Do you need any help with choosing books? How did he appear by my side so quickly? I closed my eyes in frustration and confusion. No, I replied as I opened my eyes to find myself staring into his once more. Damn his eyes. I need a cigarette break. Ah, you smoke too? Marie asked as she set her notebook to the side and grabbed a small black box of cigarettes. Mind if I join you? She then did the strangest thing. She turned to face him and waited. He stared at her for a moment, then quickly nodded yes. Marie turned to me and beamed a smile. Let's go. We walked outside and leaned against the wall to light up. She drew in a deep breath and exhaled it all out in a cloud of nicely scented smoke. What are those? I asked as I pointed with my own lit cig. Clove cigarettes that you can only purchase in a small store in the quarter, she replied with a sly grin. We puffed in silence for a time. Suddenly I felt a touch, lightly, against my back. Who is he? I asked. Marie looked straight ahead, not saying a word. Marie? Is he threatening you or something? Do you owe him money or is he blackmailing you? Look, I know we just met, but if you're in trouble or whatever, I can help you. She took a deep breath, then turned to face me with tears in her eyes. You'll understand soon enough, she said with a trembling smile. We all will. He had to have been hurting her or doing something illegal. Why else would she act like this? As if she heard my thoughts, she shook her head. He saved me, she said in a low yet clear tone. He changed my life for the better. I didn't want to know anymore. Whatever it was, I knew that he probably wasn't harmful, but perhaps a little eccentric. Maybe he was one of those self-help gurus. She wasn't in love with him at all, but merely grateful for turning her life around. Marie finished her cigarette and we returned inside, where my guide now had 2 piles of books and was still looking for more. I walked over to him while Marie began tallying his books. "Hello," I said as he turned to face me with a smile. "By the way," I added as I placed a hand on his arm, "I get it." His eyebrows went up in mild surprise. I patted his arm twice, then returned to Marie. "I wonder if he had one of those retreats somewhere, like in the swamp." "I'd hope not." "Right," I told Marie as I rubbed my hands together. "I'm ready to give you my list." "Perfect." And that is chapter 1, more or less, of The Blood Emperor by me, published through 7th Star Press. If this was enough to tantalize you and make you want to know more, you can order the trade paperback through me, my tea business, viridianteacompany.com. Or if you want the ebook or the hardback, you can go to 7th Star Press. And I will be posting the links so you can go to the right place and place your order. And also, if you're interested in the tea blend, the Blood Emperor blend, you can get that from viridianteacompany.com as well. Thank you so much for sitting here with me and listening to a book that I'm extremely proud of. And I hope that if you do buy it and you read it, let me know what you think. Even if you didn't care for it, even if you love it, even if you use it to prop open a door, I'm still grateful. So until next month, I wish you happy holidays, and I'll see you back here in January. Bye.